The British cover for this book has a backwards American flag with flower petals and a skull and bones. I don't understand this cover. It feels like they threw together random stock art to avoid spending any money. That's basically how I do the pictures for these reviews. As for the American cover, it is really cool looking, but it is a scene that never appears in the book.
Argo Font Book Review, Argo Font Book Review.
Nancy, Ned, and George are visiting an amusement park 20 miles south of River Heights. Famous magician Adriana Polidori is the park's new owner, following the tragic death of her uncle Nikos. Adriana does a magic show based on Arabian Nights, complete with a genie and a princess who wants to escape her life in the palace. Disaster strikes when the flying carpet catches on fire. I bet Jafar is responsible for this. The fire is put out by Mikhail Grigov, Adriana's former partner. He's fiercely protective of Adriana. He begs her to give up the park and join his touring magic show. Ned and George ride on the roller coaster without Nancy, which is rude of them. They're both injured when the roller coaster partially derails. They're stuck hanging upside down 30 feet in the air. They're rescued by Nancy and the chief engineer, Rand Hagen. At the hospital, they meet Freda Clark. Her son was hurt at the park last year. She's been suing to get the park shut down ever since. Hagen demonstrates the roller coaster braking system. The culprit must have removed a nut and a pin from the wheels, but there's no way to prove it. Hagen reluctantly names Benny Gottnick as a suspect. Benny is a disgruntled ex-employee who was fired when Adriana took over. Freda gets an emergency order to shut down the park immediately. Grigov continues begging Adriana to leave with him. When she refuses, Grigov confronts Nancy in the parking lot and blames her investigation for giving Adriana false hope. Like Nancy isn't a professional detective who has solved hundreds of cases. Nancy's father gives her the legal angle. There's a hearing about the park this week. Clark is being backed by her rich and powerful fiancé, Vince Garrity. He's a former city councilman who owns a big garbage plant. Benny is one of his employees. Nancy says something strange happened with her dad. George guesses he convicted a criminal who escaped from jail and took Nancy hostage. I know she's joking, but that definitely sounds like a story which would appear in this series. No, the strange thing is that Nancy's dad has a date tonight. Ooh la la! Nancy and George go to the Clark house. The 12-year-old boy admits the accident was his fault. Freda doesn't care. She is still going to sue the park. Garrity rudely manhandles Nancy while throwing her out. Instead of going home the normal way, Nancy takes a secluded mountain road. The culprit shows up in Grigov's car and almost forces her car off a cliff. It's sheer luck she survives. Nancy and Ned have a date at a romantic dress-up restaurant. Nancy is shocked to see her dad is there with his date, Adriana! Dad, you can't date one of Nancy's clients! For that matter, Adriana is his client too. Dad is nervous and embarrassed. Nancy pretends everything's great, even though she doesn't like the dating situation. Dad makes French toast for breakfast the next morning. Nancy reminds him to use cinnamon. That is not how she made French toast in the Nancy Drew cookbook. Adriana does a magic show for some kids. The grand finale is a rope escape. She secretly teaches Nancy and Ned how to do the rope trick. That's legitimately useful information to know, considering how often Nancy Drew gets tied up by criminals in this series. Grigov claims his car was stolen when the culprit tried to kill Nancy. Adriana knows this because she was with him at the time. She admits Grigov loves her, and he asked her to marry him multiple times. She doesn't love him back, which is why she thinks it's okay for her to date Nancy's dad. Nancy goes to meet Benny Gottnick, only to find he was murdered with Grigov's knife. The good news is that she finds the missing roller coaster pin in his house. That proves the incident was sabotage. Nancy walks in on her father and Adriana in a passionate embrace. They claimed they weren't kissing. He was comforting Adriana. She was very upset about Grigov being arrested. Does Dad know Grigov proposed to Adriana twice? I think Nancy should tell him. An unknown person offers to buy the amusement park. Ned investigates this real estate angle. He leaves a message for Nancy, saying there are secret tunnels under the park. It can't be rezoned for new purposes. So why would someone want to buy it? Ned disappears. His rarely seen mother is very upset. She asks Nancy to help find him. Nancy goes to the realtor's office, which has a pushy secretary who refuses to say anything. Nancy purposely uses the bathroom so she can open the window and break into the building after hours. She finds a scrap of paper that says Garrity is the one who wants to buy the park. At the hearing, Nancy's dad tries his hardest, but he loses when Hagen appears as a surprise witness. Hagen testifies against Adriana, and the park is officially closed, pending an investigation. Nancy thinks it's suspicious that Hagen has suddenly turned on Adriana. She secretly follows Hagen to the park, where he uses one of the secret underground tunnels. It turns out Hagen and Garrity are the culprits. They are using the secret tunnels to illegally dump hazardous waste. Nancy is caught by the culprits when she accidentally drops her flashlight. The culprits explain the details of their scheme as they prepare an elaborate death trap. The plan is to blow up Nancy and Ned with dynamite, but they make the mistake of using a slow-burning fuse. That gives Nancy and Ned more than enough time to use the rope escape tricks, break down the door, and leave the building before it explodes. The police arrive, thanks to a phone call from George. Nancy likes unnecessary danger, so instead of letting the police take over, she decides to capture the culprits herself. This involves storming their hideout and dodging bullets like a superhero. I'm still not sure why Nancy thought the culprits had to be caught right away. I'm pretty sure the culprits were not trying to escape. They thought Nancy died in the explosion. It will take at least a year to clean up the park, so Adriana decides to leave town with Grigov. She promises they haven't seen the last of her, but the internet says otherwise. I feel bad for Nancy's dad now. He lost his girlfriend to her pushy ex. The end. Post-book follow-up. I thought this book was a fun read. Adriana was an interesting character, instead of being a generic victim who fades into the background after Nancy accepts the case. Even if she didn't have love drama with Nancy's dad, she would still be interesting. The other characters were less interesting. Freda, Garrity, and Grigov are all the generic angry suspect who yells at Nancy. Surprisingly, Benny Gottnick is on the official suspect list, even though he only appears as a corpse. He takes Garrity's spot on the suspect list, and since Hagen is the guy who's too nice to be a suspect, that means neither culprit is on the official suspect list. I'm not sure if I should criticize the start of the book. The magic show Sabotage and Roller Coaster Incident were interesting. They drew me into the story, but they don't get a follow-up. It's weird the culprits make a single attempt to kill Adriana, then they never try to hurt her again. Ned and George were both good in this book. His kidnapping could have been improved by a ransom note or something, but it's good enough. I give Nancy Drew Files number 94, Illusions of Evil, an 8 out of 10.